My name is Kim Anderson. I'm the festival director, and again, I'm just so pleased to see you all. Growing a Garden City features 15 main characters, all Montanans: a farmer, a foodie, a teenage drug addict, a homeless shelter chef, a single mother, an entire first grade class, and more. Jeremy is here to talk about this creation today, how it began, how it evolved, along with some of the characters that he shares with us. Jeremy's a writer and freelance journalist. His work has appeared in Gourmet and Saveur. Is that right?
That is factually correct.
All
Yes,
right, excellent.
That's true.
Every time I see a French word, I tend to break into a sweat.
Oh, the pronunciation. Let's not stress ourselves. It's
Right.
Friday in Missoula.
The Christian Science Monitor, the Chicago Tribune, High Country News, and Montana Magazine. His new book has been praised by Jane Goodall, founder of the Jane Goodall Institute and UN Messenger of Peace, who says, "I love this book. It proves that every one of us and every patch of soil can make a difference. The way we connect with nature, with our food, and with each other can change the world." So please help me welcome Jeremy Smith.
Thanks so much. I'm standing in front of the mic. I bet you can still hear me. If you do have trouble hearing any of us, please let me know. I want to introduce the book and some of its topics and get a little bit of sense of your background and your interests. And then open it up to sort of a round table with myself, who knows a little about a lot of things, and then with Jody, Allison Brunel, Jason Kiley, and Lori, who has a new last name.
Bridgman.
Lori Bridgman, who are each involved in the book and know a lot about their aspect of it, as well as many other things I'm sure I'll learn in the course of our time together. So, briefly, let me get a sense of who you are. How many of you are from Missoula? Okay. How many of you who did not raise your hand, are from within Montana? And is there anyone who is outside the state? Okay, great. How many of you are familiar in some way with the local food movement? Could you raise your hand? Okay. How many of you are familiar with what's going on here in Missoula under the umbrella organization Garden City Harvest? Okay. So I will say some things that are familiar to you and try to introduce just some of these basic things so we can have a discussion where we're all involved for the rest of you. The book is kind of structured like a documentary. And the idea is it's a documentary that you can step into if you wanted to in your own life, whether you live here or elsewhere in Montana or anywhere in the country. And the idea is whoever you are, local food and community farms and gardens, if you want to, can change your lives and help transform your neighborhood. And why local food? Well, there are many reasons. And many of them are pleasurable because it tastes a lot better to have something fresh, direct, when you know the person who grew it. That is also more satisfying. But also, Americans are getting poorer, and we're getting hungrier, and our food is coming from farther away, and we're getting sicker from our food. Okay? We have, in Missoula County alone, 12,000 individuals using the food bank every year. That's 1 in 8 people. 1 in 5 people here live below the poverty line. And the homeless shelter is serving about 200 people a night when it's busy at the soup kitchen. Can we grow our own food to sustain ourselves? Can that be not just practical, can that be practical, I should say? Can it be something that's easy to get into? Can it be something that's fun and enjoyable? Can it be as satisfying as taking a walk? Or even the end product, sharing a meal together? Can we do so affordably? Can we bring the best possible food? These sort of organic fruits and vegetables that are beamed across sort of the Top Chef's restaurant menus or Food Network shows. Can we bring those to every member of a community? And if so, how? And as you're probably guessing, the answer is we can do that. And we are doing it here in Missoula. And we're doing it through community gardens and community farms, among other things, in partnership with other organizations that invite everyone in a community, whoever they are, to participate, to get something and to give something. So, for example, there is a student farm, the Peas Farm. Can you raise your hand if you've been to the Peas Farm or know of the Peas Farm? Okay. Many of you. At the Peas Farm, students from the University of Montana learn to grow food, learn how to farm or garden, many for the first time. Community members can subscribe to that farm and help support it by paying a few $100s up front, but then they don't just support it. Every week during the growing season, they get enough fruits and vegetables to feed a family of 4 for less than they would at the farmer's market and much less than they would at the grocery store. At the same time, in the program Lori oversees, troubled teenagers in the community looking for a therapeutic experience and a job, many of them have had trouble with the law and have been sentenced or given the chance to work there instead of going to juvenile detention. In the Youth Harvest program, teenagers in the community do farm work therapy instead of wilderness therapy. And they're working together, growing food, talking things out, being outdoors, being employed, learning this skill at the same time the students. They grow so much food that they run a mobile market. There's wonderful pictures of Lori in the big red van in the book with some of the kids where they travel to residences around town for people who wouldn't otherwise have access to this kind of food. Maybe low-income seniors, housing for military veterans, or the developmentally disabled adults. And Lori can talk more about the specifics of that. And they run mobile farmers markets at reduced price. So without the teenagers, the seniors wouldn't have the food. Without the seniors, the teenagers wouldn't have that job. So it's an example of some of the most vulnerable members of a community actually supporting each other through that common bond of food. At the same time, at that site, kids, first graders, second graders, up to high school students, even some college students, many of you obviously, visit on field trips. And the land itself is actually leased from the public school system. So the kids aren't just getting farm education, outdoor education, agriculture education, a sense of where good food and how good food is really grown at a time when 1/3 of all kids in elementary school today are predicted to have type 2 diabetes by the time they graduate high school. They're getting a connection with food, and they're having fun. How do you make a kid eat a vegetable? Make it dirty. And they play in the ground, they come back, and they say, we changed our snack to kale. That's a true story. Cookies to kale. Which is, not a bad motto. Cookies to kale. Keep that in mind. You've seen it on TV. You heard it here first. Also, those kids, that's, there are other programs connected to that farm. But then there are other farms and gardens. That's just one site in a network of about a dozen. And what's special about these sites is each one is different. It's not some one-size-fits-all model. And I try to map out as many as I can in the book. Each one is tailored to the needs and abilities of its community. So, for example, Jason and his wife, Gita, a few years ago, when they had one kid and another on the way, moved into a house, new house, a little bigger than their old house, and it faced a vacant city lot. And they thought, could something beautiful be here? Could something valuable be here? Could something useful be here? And they help found a community garden where for $25, $35 a year, 35 is it? Yeah, $35 a year, you get a plot of land enough to grow food for your family. In a neighborhood surrounded by people who are either renting or have small lots or mobile units and aren't able to grow their own food otherwise. And they grow their own food. $35. Water, tools, advice, community. Another farm, not too far from that on River Road, Jody is a member of. She subscribes to it in the way I described and helps volunteer there. There's a Volunteer for Veggies program where anyone can show up for an hour or two at a time without any previous experience or any future commitment necessary and come home with about 10 pounds of great local organic produce. So that's a way you're volunteering, you're contributing to the farm, but you're also getting this wonderful food at a better than you would if you tried to earn that money on minimum wage and then buy it. And a lot of that food grown goes to the soup kitchen, just as a lot of the food grown at the Peace Farm goes to the food bank. And when I say a lot, I mean tens of thousands of pounds of food a year. I mean a lot. And Jody has done a wonderful thing. She's feeding her family with that food, and she's also tracking pretty carefully where her food dollars are spent. She's spending what, about 60% of your food dollars, 50, 60?
Between 55 and 60% of our food dollars in the 6 years that I kept track of every food dollar went to local food.
Yeah, and that's not just, and that includes beer, wine, lamb, chickens. She's not starving herself, or her kids, or her partner. And she's able to talk about, her section is called The Foodie. And it's about living very richly for less than most people pay to eat very poorly. And how that works. I could go on. There's many other examples. School gardens. Student gardens. Community farm partnerships, where there's a farm operated now under adjacent to a youth home, where the kids there are learning to grow food on a larger scale. There is a new community garden in partnership with a church in town, where they're donating the land, helping grow the food. Most of it goes, if I'm not mistaken, and Genevieve Jessup March, the organizer for some of these programs at Garden City Harvest, could also be dragged up here with a chair and answer some other questions, or we can direct them backwards. At that site, a lot of the food is grown to feed homeless families in transitional housing. Not what is on the magazine covers as the faces of local food or the hot topics, okay? So all of us can eat the best possible food. We can grow it in ways that are easy, hopefully, and fun, and certainly affordable. We can contribute to each other's well-being. And, in the book, I try to share these people's stories, how they did it in their own words. A lot of photos too, and then interspersed with that is how it works sections. So I think the best thing to do is sort of respond to your interest, your questions, and if you don't have them, I'd be happy to ask or sort of initiate some questions. But why don't we get started? Does anyone have a question to get us started? Yes?
Yeah, I work at Lowell Elementary School. They've got a school garden there. And I know they're trying to get, the Missoula County has a farm to school program. Do you know what percentage of local foods are getting into the
school cafeteria system?
School cafeteria, and how we get more into that?
Yeah. What a good question. I'm going to direct that question to me, of the three of us here. And perhaps to Genevieve too, okay? But the local food served in the cafeterias is largely separate from the food raised in the school gardens. Those are more for the people participating in it or big one-off events where they're having local food lunch days. If I'm not mistaken, and jump in if I am, please, Genevieve, or Lori, or if you know better than I do. The food served in the cafeteria, the local food, is from commercial farmers, ranchers. And it's important that these programs don't compete with them, don't make their job any harder. It's a really tough job because the school lunch budget is extremely constrained. You have about $1 per person per meal. And you have a huge variety of one-size-fits-all federal safety standards, which often mean, you're having, vast batches of lettuce sent in from thousands of miles away, going through an intense cleaning process that looks a lot like poisoning to me. So you should keep pushing for it, but I can't answer much more about how the specifics of it work.
What about the farm to school program? Doesn't that incorporate?
Yeah, and that is that program, the Farm to School program. They're buying stuff from Montana farmers and ranchers. And, at the University of Montana, for example, there's a thriving Farm to School program where they're buying millions of dollars worth of that food. And that's because the cafeteria system there is a lot more flexible, what they can serve, how they can do it. There is a local Farm to School program, and it used to be run in partnership with the Community Food and Agriculture Coalition in town, which is now been largely handed off directly to the head of the school lunch system. So I'm not sure what the latest numbers are there. And I will say a great organization to support, the one that did the groundwork to start that program and is doing the most research to sort of make sure it's vital and make sure we're not counting like Montana Ice as a farm to school product, or Coca-Cola because it's bottled here as a farm to school product. Because once you start putting, statistics on the board, it can be real motivating, especially for a sort of official caught in the middle to play with those numbers. They're keeping people honest, and they're trying to put the best possible food, best possible local food there. They've got a fundraiser on Monday, which I highly recommend. Scotty's Table for dinner, just $15, burger, fries, beer, all local. All the proceeds go to that organization.
Vegetarian?
So, I don't know if they have a vegetarian option. They do. Yeah, do it. Yeah.
I'm from Helena, where we're not nearly so advanced in so many wonderful things as the Garden City is with gardens. And I've not been closely involved, but I have some friends who are, and one of the things they're kind of struggling with is they're operating under a 501c3, actually it's real. But what they're wondering is, over here, do you have an overarching 501c3? If so, how does that work? In other words, when they apply for grants, or if people want to make donations, which they would prefer, obviously, to have be tax deductible. I don't think anybody gives just for that purpose, but we're all kind of pinching the pennies. And I thought I could maybe carry back, how do you manage that in Missoula? Obviously, the schools are kind of a different cup of tea because they're a unit of local government, so that works fine. But what about the other ones around? Are there different nonprofits that sponsor them or manage them?
So, I actually, everyone here can answer part of that question because there's many pieces to that question. The short answer is yes, there is a 501c3, and yes, they're in partnership with other 501c3s and government agencies. But
And what is your overarching one?
Genevieve, why don't you answer that one briefly, or Lori, if you know, do you know the answer?
I mean, I think we both can.
Why don't you answer it since you're up here?
Well, I guess I just need to try to understand your question a little bit more. Within Garden City Harvest, we are the overarching 501c3, and within that we do, I think we have 4 community or neighborhood farms and 7 community gardens, and within that we have an educational program, we have a youth program. So it is like, it's a big spider web, but over the top of it is Garden City Harvest. And then like we have the Peas Farm, and then we have like those 7 community gardens. So yes, does that answer
That's
your
exactly
question?
what I needed to know.
Okay.
And when
You have a 501c3 that is specifically created for this project, which has many different pieces and parts.
So for the Youth Harvest Program,
No, that's just what I.
Does, for example-
I'm sorry, I have to go, so I'm really
No,
glad
no.
you answered that.
Yeah.
I'd love to stay for the whole program. But that essentially is what they need to know, because they're kind of struggling with, do we stay here? Do we look for another partner? Do we try to start a 501c3, which isn't always so easy? So I'm directing them to your book, mind you.
I would add too that I think like CFAC and Community Food and Agriculture Coalition is another one that adds a lot to our programs, and the schools are obvious partners, and they're also.
The university is a partner, the food bank is a partner, the homeless shelter is a partner, the youth homes is a partner.
Human Resource Council.
But for you to be a full partner, from the founding, it was, or very close to the founding, it was a separate 501c3. And just, I think funding is important. I mean, funders are important, and they have different faces. They can be individual donors, and they can be organizations. So I think just sort of quickly, I mean, Jason, when you were founding that community garden, funding was an important part. What did you need before you got funding? Before you asked for money, what kind of due diligence did you do? And where did the funding come from?
I don't mean to, I couldn't believe you, because I'm sure it's most valuable, but that major question was one I really needed to
Thank
know
you.
about. And as I say, I'm directing this group to your wonderful book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Jeremy's referencing the Second Street Community Garden on the, I guess technically the south side of Missoula, near the Good Food Store, just east of the Good Food Store for those of you who are local but haven't walked over in that little nook. And basically, you know, when we first talked to Garden City Harvest about it, they you know, appropriately responded, "That's a great idea. What can you do to help make it happen?" And I said, "Well, what's typically what you ask folks to do to demonstrate?" He said, "Well, you know, you can start with going around and surveying the neighborhoods, the neighbors, and even a simple petition form to some way of demonstrating, hey, I'd be interested in participating in the garden, and maybe there's a deeper level commitment for some of those folks I'd like to help organize in the first place." And I'd done that in a previous life, so I was comfortable doing that, and I literally just went and knocked on doors. And
So about how many people did you get to sort of sign something or say in some way, yeah, that's something I'd probably support or participate in?
it had to be, you know, we weren't talking about a huge piece of land, so I think even maybe 50 households, you know, ultimately said this is a good idea. And that remarkably didn't cover tons of blocks, but we now have, maybe Genevieve can help, how many, maybe there's 20 plots there, if that many?
It's 15.
15 plots? Right, so, you know, it was scaled to the neighborhood, it's kind of contiguous the way it fit. And so we took that, and that was kind of, it helped reach the bar for Garden City Harvest, because they've got, you know, constrained resources just like everybody else. They can't just, you can't just run an organization on good ideas. There's got to be some sweat equity in it. So we kind of demonstrated that initial interest and started to have real grassroots meetings of folks who would be willing to help. And then we looked for opportunities. Actually, one of the neighbors that I think heard about us and came to us, this little group we had organized, said, you know, we helped get a grant from the city to build just kind of a beautification garden in our neighborhood, because it was, they wanted to do that.
This funds part of the city budget for like urban redevelopment?
Exact, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to remember exactly, yeah, it was,
Because it's a changing area of town where the city has already said explicitly, we're going to put this percentage of our urban redevelopment money into it. What are the projects it's going to be? We don't know yet.
That's right. And it had to have a public benefit. It couldn't just be, you know, for private benefit. And so we went and we filled out their application, and Gwen Hoppy, this lady who had done it, helped do that and kind of walk us through it. And basically the pitch was, look, if you put in a water line, which is a pretty expensive deal, a few $1,000s, it'd be hard to raise dollar, you know, from individuals. It'll improve the value of the neighborhood and the infrastructure of the neighborhood, and give this garden a permanent source of water, which of course is critical. And so that we were met with, that was really, quite frankly, easy to get. And then there was another source of funds too. We had to do that before MRA. That was the same source of funds, if I'm not mistaken.
Missoula Redevelopment Agency.
Yeah.
So it was definitely, you know, it's not, this is a good idea, we'll build it and people will come. It's, if they come, we'll talk about building it. And I think that is important. And I think, you know, I've talked to a lot of people in the course of, you know, talking about the book, and people say, oh, we did this in our community, we came in, there was a neighborhood that didn't have this, we came in and built it, and then people never came and used it. And that is also something that the original organizer for Garden City Harvest for the community garden says. if you build it, they're not necessarily going to come. You've got to have the interest in some way in the people in the neighborhood. And you can interest them in multiple ways. It doesn't have to just be a community garden where they have to commit up front to, to work that land for the whole season. Jody, I think your experience was you were at the farmer's market one day, fastest growing part of the food economy, farmers markets in the United States. And, the question was, somebody said, do you want to sign up for a CSA? And she said, sure. And then she said, what is a CSA? So,
Well, no, first they said, do you want some kale?
oh, first,
And I
so
said,
she had already been turned to the,
and then, they sucked me in through the kale. This is why I have a 1-year-old who will eat kale with miso.
Okay.
He really likes.
so, in your experience, so why don't you answer that question? Now you know a little bit better. What is a CSA?
So a CSA is a subscription. You basically, you tell the farmer, I would like to have your produce all season. You pay that farmer a certain amount up front, maybe the whole amount up front, maybe over the season, depending on how it's structured. And in return, you pick up produce or have it delivered to you the whole season. It works differently depending on the particular CSA. But it means that the farmer has some security. Where people at the farmer's market, every Saturday at noon, I kind of look around and think, and where are they going to go with all this produce, I wonder? Where are they going to go with bags of huckleberries that have sat out in the sun for the last 3 hours?
Or Saturday at 10 a.m. and they're out.
Right. Yeah,
And,
you see the
You
problem.
know, if I only grown twice as much basil,
Yeah.
or whatever.
So this gives the farmer a lot of predictability. They get some upfront money to buy seeds, equipment, manure, whatever else they need, invest in a tractor repair, whatever. And then I, in turn, know what's coming to me. The things that were initially attractive about this is we were spending $20 to $25 a week at the farmer's market anyway. We may as well just pay it all to one organization and have it come every week. And then we also knew if you don't pick up your CSA with Garden City Harvest, it goes to the food bank or the Pavarello Center. So it wasn't that it was going to go to waste or that I was always going to have to find a neighbor to pick it up, because that doesn't always work out. I knew that the money was going to an organization that also spread the produce and the resources around to the community, and so that was a very good thing to get to do.
And when you get a CSA, you talked to me about this, how you cook differently. You kind of, instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to make pad thai tonight, or I'm going to make tacos, or I'm going to make spaghetti, you say, here's what I got this week.
What
And
can I do with cabbage again?
This is the best possible food available in the world. It's grown locally, organically, by people I know. I picked it up today. It's beautiful. It's perfect. But I don't know what to do with it. And, you told me the greatest technique, and I'll just say it in case you've forgotten, because you have so many tricks, I'm sure. She said, well, you start from the back of the cookbook. They have an index there. So you just find whatever the thing is, and boy, there's actually a lot. If you get 2 or 3 of these cookbooks, there's a lot of different things you can make with, any of these things. For example, I know with kale make, I poach eggs on kale. I make an Indian, curried kind of dish with kale and fried cheese cubes. I make a Tuscan pesto with kale, and then, I think you and I have the same staple in the winter. Which is with almost every meal you can have it as a
Winter salad.
winter salad.
Mm-hmm.
Slice some onions real thin, little goat cheese or dried tomatoes, or I don't know how you do
Really
it.
that elaborate. I steam it and put salad dressing on it. Called good.
Yes, she has one more child than I do, so
I do.
she's a lot more efficient.
But the essential thing that you give yourself over to when you have a CSA is that the food is kind of in charge. It isn't that you dream up and then recipes or menus and then go get the food. The food comes sometimes at unpredictable times. The thing that Jeremy didn't mention is I not only have a growing season CSA, but we have a winter CSA. So that means that yesterday I picked up 25 pounds of carrots and 15 pounds of parsnips, and how many pounds of hot peppers did we get? That was a lot.
And by winter CSA, it's not food grown in the winter in Montana.
It's to store.
It's food that's grown that's easy to put up for winter. So
Yeah.
you get how many pounds of onions at once?
Wasn't that 120 or 150 this year? I
Yeah.
think so.
And then you don't shop all winter. And you put in a lot of work for that 1 month when you get all that food putting it somewhere, or canning it, or freezing it, or drying it, or whatever, or making sauces. But then you told me, you actually cook less in the winter. Winter is a lot less work for you than summer to even eat well. Where if you want spaghetti or something like that,
More or less ready.
you just take off the sauce, it's there, pour it in. The vegetables are already chopped, they're frozen, they're fresh, and you're eating, fresh local salsa, in February, where everybody else is, I don't know, struggling for their Super Bowl party.
You don't have a family before, can you eat like half a share or quarter shares at CSA?
Yeah.
Some of them have half shares, and then they also it's another good way to get to know somebody. Split it with somebody too. But they do have half shares now. And this is true at the Pease Farm, at River Road, and at Orchard Gardens, I believe. I don't know if Orchard Gardens, can you subscribe to a CSA if you're not a resident?
If you're not a resident?
Yeah, of Orchard Gardens.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes. There's another opportunity in this. We always hear we should be eating more vegetables. This is the opportunity to actually eat vegetables 3 times a day. Greens are a good thing to eat at breakfast. And again, it's an opportunity. You can transform the way that you eat and really get a lot more variety and better food, again, than most people in America even get, even with a heftier budget.
And you're throwing in wine, primo meats and stuff that you're buying too,
Right.
and cheeses and things like that. It's not some austere monk's pledge. What was your finding for your sort of food budget? I mean, because you were keeping track of it, which was remarkable. And I should say she's an archivist, of sorts, by profession.
By
So,
profession, yes.
what did you find you were spending on food?
So over the 6 years that I was keeping track, and I have stopped keeping track because I needed to prove myself that I could stop keeping track of all the grocery I can stop anytime, I told my family, and I did. I stopped a year and a half ago, and then we had another kid, and I made it really easy to stop. Anyway, so the USDA issues 5 levels of food budgets. They issue these every month. These are used for military payments, for alimony, a lot of different things. They track very closely what groceries actually cost in America this month. And they allow a lot of nuance for feeding males, females, different ages, children, their ages, that kind of thing. Over that time, the USDA moderate level budget, so there's 5 levels, this is the middle one, for a family of my size and composition, averaged between $130 and $133 a month. And this included 2007, 2008, where food prices really, really spiked. That still encompassed that average. During that time, my family spent $120 a week on an average. And again, this is with really nice food. We do eat meat, we eat a fair amount of it. All locally produced, bought directly from producers as whole animals, which is another opportunity. You get to use parts of you don't just eat steak and chicken breasts all the time. You learn to eat pork neck and other kinds of things. So that some of the cheaper cuts of meats are included, along with the really nice cuts that we save for a special occasion.
Did you say a week or a month?
I said a week.
And the first
So that's
part,
for-
you said a week, or you said a month.
Oh, I'm sorry.
$100 a month.
Must be afternoon.
The national average is 130 to 133 a month.
Yeah.
week.
Oh, okay.
A week.
A week.
And then
And that's not for per person, that's for
That's for a family of
That's for
3.
a family.
Yeah.
So, and now, Lori, and I don't even know the answer to this question, so I'm interested to hear. And this is as I said, this is the Youth Harvest program that she's running. And this is a program that is employing at-risk teenagers, the majority of which I believe have, before they come to you, have appeared before a youth drug court. And there's therapy stuff, and there's training, and then there's actual employment. Plus, there's running this, so you're paying them, plus you're receiving money, you're running a mobile farmer's market in a variety of sites, and it's mobile. There's a van, there's multiple sites you're getting that food from. So how does the money work there?
What do you mean?
What?
Do you pay for it all?
Yeah, how do you pay for, it's,
Okay.
yeah.
How do you pay for the program? Primarily through 3 ways. One is through the state of Montana. Working with the state and corrections, they pay us for the kids that we work with. The second way is that this year through the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, they had granted us a large sum of money as well. So those are kind of the two main ways. The third way is that the youth get paid through the Human Resource Council, through their youth employment program that they have. And so through those ways, we're able to run our program, and those are kind of the three primary ways that we do it. We make a very small amount of money off of the mobile market, which is the point. And so we can pay for our gas and pay for our insurance on our truck. Roughly, I don't think we can even cover that much. So that's kind of how that works.
Would you tell us a story about something that happened the past season with one of the youths, whether it was at the, there's the Tom Roy, or the youth, North Avenue Youth Farm.
So yeah, maybe who are these? Who are the kids you're working with? What and who are they? What's kind of their background or mix of backgrounds? And how many are there? And then what's an example, sort of an example experience?
Well, so most of the kids come from Missoula Youth Drug Court and Judge John Larson. He's been a really big motivator in keeping this program going, and has been a really great support for us. So we employ about 5 to 7 kids every season, and then we also have a position for a mentor type role. So it's still within the same age group, 15 to 17, but this youth is usually always involved in the foster care system, but has kind of gotten to a place more where they're figuring life out a little bit better, kind of making a little bit more positive choices in their world, and can kind of be a little bit more of a mentor. Same age range though, so that's how we get those individuals. I think that one of the greatest things I saw this year is because of the amount of processed food that is being fed to you from the time that you're in kindergarten through high school, and your taste buds don't really sometimes like what real food tastes like. And so that's the thing that I always run into with high schoolers, is they really have a problem with the food. And we eat lunch all together with the college interns every day. And so this is always kind of a challenge, is oh my gosh, what is that? We were eating goat sometimes, and they were flipping out. But one kid, it was a really great thing to see from start to finish. I never make them eat. I would never say you have to eat, or even you have to try it. I always try to get them to try it. But one kid from the start to the finish, he didn't want anything to do with it, and would eat, if we had white rice, he would eat a plate of white rice, which is oh no. So, but by the end of it, he was eating everything and loving it, and wanting to take boxes and boxes of food home. I let them take pretty much as much food home as they would like, and was cooking it for his mother, and was really just really.
This food they've grown.
Food. Right. And the last day, we always do evaluations. I was talking to him, and I didn't have any idea about this, but it's so interesting to have a 17-year-old say to you, I just I'll never look at a can the same way again. And that's if you've achieved nothing else, that is a really exciting moment, just to know that he knows what it takes now to put something in that can. Because we did canning and stuff with them too, so.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's just a particular program that has so many parts going on. You're teaching people how to grow food. You're dealing with some people who really want to be there, some people who are here because the alternative is detention. You're a boss, you're a counselor, you're a shopkeeper for the different clients of the mobile market, and who maybe don't know anything more of your background or the kids' backgrounds than that you're just showing up every week with that food. What is your background, and what have you learned on the job? How do you get into that, and then what do you have to learn? Because all the experience will teach you.
Oh geez, I'll try to answer it as concisely as possible. I started working with Garden City Harvest about 7 or 8 years ago. At the River Road Garden with Greg, and as with a lot of people, and I'm sure that many of you can relate, that getting your hands and being part of the earth is really restorative and really therapeutic. And I seem to come and find myself in this world and just became a much happier person. And I met Tim Ballard some years later, who was the founder of the Youth Harvest Project. And I just felt really compelled and called to this work. And I worked under him for a few years. I went to school, back to school, and got my master's in social work. And as everyone hopes, you kind of train your replacement. And Tim and I worked very closely together. And he trained me into this position. And it is the hardest position, just like you were saying, I feel, because you do wear so many hats of therapist and mentor and boss, which is never like that exciting with these kids. Lots of times, a lot of them don't want to be there. But the work is incredible and intense and exciting and lovely and awful, all rolled into one. But it's really exciting to let them get their hands on something tangible and real and see outcomes and things like that, and not sit at home and watch TV, because I think that that's what goes on a lot. So it's just exciting.
And I think that's the goal of any therapy, and it's particularly manifest in like wilderness therapy, which is much more longer practice, where you're outside on a much longer time scale than a sort of 9-to-5 job. You're not watching a clock, you're watching things change. And I think it's just a brilliant connection to say, why don't we have the same kind of advantages of wilderness therapy, but then also be connecting them with the community rather than exiling them from the community. I mean, yeah.
We call it experience-based therapy. And a girl that I was doing an evaluation with yesterday said the same thing. She said, I just want everyone to experience this happiness that I felt. And I was kind of like, oh, wow, you know, so we try to, if you create positive, beautiful experiences for people, the idea is that people will continue to seek out those positive experiences.
And what Tim said, the founder of the program, he said, you know, this is not to solve all the problems in your life, but it gives you at the very least, it gives you a positive reference point. So you know there are good experiences. And this is what a good experience feels like. And if it doesn't feel like this, maybe you should do something else. If it feels like this, maybe you're on the right path. Whether you're doing whatever, whether you're taking a class, finishing high school, helping your family, whatever. What are the different clients of that program?
There's lots of them.
I mean of the mobile market, for example.
Oh, like where do we go? Like who are the people we serve?
And I want to ask, I'm going to ask a related question to Jason and Jody.
Most of them are all seniors with low income in some sort of subsidized housing, whether it is Section 8 or a private nonprofit organization. And then we serve disabled veterans and veterans, as well as mentally and physically handicapped people, and these are all low-income residents. So we work with the Housing Authority quite a bit too, to find places for us to go.
Now, Jody, in your work in the at the farm, you show up to get your food, but also I know for at least one of those, you can reduce the bill by putting in about 10 hours of volunteer time.
It's 10 hours per share, so 10 hours for the summer share, 10 hours for the winter share, a total of 20 hours over the season.
Yeah. And but if you bring, your husband, you could do that together, for example.
I also bring the child.
And a child, yes. That is person hours, not just total, So if you bring a friend, you can talk to them, hang out, that kind of thing, and double your time right there.
And weed the onions.
So what are the people that you find there? Are they people, I don't know, maybe, again, we've said your background a little bit. You're an archivist. Your husband's a computer professional. And, do you find that most people have your background, or is it a mix, or how, who do you meet at the garden?
It's everyone. I really meet everyone at the garden. There are naturally lots of students. Also, in the last, I think, 3 years, one of my neighbors is out there a lot. She's a part-time professor at the university, chooses to work a massive number of hours every season in exchange for just about all of her share. Really has become one of Greg's right-hand people. I think I may have mentioned for a summer or two, there was a woman who I had lots of really interesting conversations with, who it turned out was dying. I had no idea, but it was actually in her obituary that was where she spent her last summer, and that she was a retired program officer for the National Endowment for the Arts. I mean, I've met people who are working there for a few weeks and then headed out on the Peace Corps. I've met just all kinds of people over the last, 8 seasons.
And people who just move to town, way to meet people, and also just, as you say, students or people in that situation where it's like, I don't have money, but I have a little time. I'll show up, get some good food for
Or
you.
have skills. There was a college student working there this summer who used to work for John, as in The Real Dirt on Farmer John, the movie from Wisconsin. She grew up on a dairy farm near there and worked for him as a teenager, and now is volunteering here, and I think a university student. So you just never know who you're going to meet at the garden.
And, I know another person who subscribes to that, to the farm you do is Greg Padden, who's, a national food writer, for example. So definitely people who want the best food also seek that out.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I don't have any gardening skills besides, weeding a little, and I can follow directions if someone reminds me of them every few minutes. And, I just, if I'm going to go hang out with a few friends, sometimes they're taking a walk or shooting baskets or whatever, or going on a hike, go to the garden for a couple hours, or an hour. 4 people, I've just done 4 hours right there. That's, 20 pounds of food potentially at the end of, we could feast for weeks on that afterward if we wanted to, or, and that food that's going to us is just a fraction of it. Most of it's going to youth homes or residents or the clients of the soup kitchen, the Poverello Center soup kitchen. Jason, what about your neighborhood? Who were the people who were ending up joining this community garden?
Well, certainly there's been kind of a group of stalwarts that were there from the beginning, and then there's folks that come and go for various reasons. And so there's definitely been some great characters. There was Jacob, who is a single dad, and I think he had a social work job by day, and he'd be out there till after dark. And when he was first getting his plot together, sifting out all the rocks. I mean, this guy went to so much work and had the most kind of wild patch that he could totally knew where everything was. He's probably our most impressive gardener over time. And then you got somebody like a guy named Bruce, who's an author and was one of these guys who would get his starts going in early March in the kitchen, even though he just lives in a little apartment. We have a botanist who works for the Forest Service in the summer and in the schools as a teacher's assistant during the school year, and just does amazing extracurricular work. I mean, his plot's immaculate, but he also has designed basically a native garden kind of along the fence that we built. We had some teenagers help kind of when we were preparing the site to begin with. One of the many collaborations, we got the Montana Conservation Corps has a youth program, the kids that work in the woods or in urban environments to try and, with infrastructure projects, and they help dig a very zigzaggy water line that got the job done. So it's been a real mix, and we've had neighbors who don't choose to garden. I'm thinking of Terry in particular. Not her thing so much, but she was happy to take over the compost because she had a friend that could bring in some manure to get the heat up, and she just liked to have a job, and of course that gave her an invitation to glean when somebody's plot was it was agreed upon getting pretty full of stuff. So a real mix. And one thing that I found, and I want to put a plug in for Garden City Harvest model because I think it's a little different than what we see in most aspects of society. It's a distributed model. It's not like the big farm. I mean, there's Peas, which is probably the flagship plot in some ways. It's the one we know the most about that has a very cool story, of course. But, lots of little gardens, like a 15 plot, that's really not that huge at 2nd Street. But speaking from my experience, we had both the opportunity and the regret of moving from next door. We were literally next door to 2nd Street Garden this summer. And I went back. I was not there much this summer at all. And it's like the saddest thing about leaving our neighborhood was leaving the garden. And there's just something really powerful about that apparently might look inefficient, model of like little sites all over the world, but it makes all the difference. The people who could stay and come back year after year were those who were rooted in the neighborhood and could, for their circumstances, really kept them there. And I just think it's like something that's probably not talked about a lot. I mean, I know it's appreciated and the folks who are in it, but from the outside looking in, it's one of those things that goes against our momentum in society to concentrate. And maybe we'll do this with power eventually, distributed power. It's really an important part, and it's probably more expensive, but it really works when it's done that way.
And it seems more sustainable because you don't have one link that fails and then it falls apart.
There's that too.
You can move. You founded the garden. You can move away. It's doing great.
That's right.
And that was a vacant lot. The alternative is it's a vacant lot a couple blocks away from about the worst place to be in Missoula traffic-wise at 5 p.m. On Russell Street. And there's that. Is there another? I don't know where we are on time. Can anybody tell me that actually?
3:25?
Could I chime in on that,
Yeah,
that point
please.
about being small and distributed? We often think of in America of farms as it's got to be 100 acres or 1,000 acres of these big chunks of farmland. The fact is, worldwide, the average size of a farm is 3.5 acres. That's the River Road Garden, or farm, or garden as we call it. That's really not that much land. And a 15-plot community garden, I mean, when we look at Asia and at places that are very densely populated, but that supply a lot of their produce, I hope I'm not misquoting this, but if I remember, within Singapore, the majority of produce is grown within the city on little teeny plots like that in backyards, backyard chickens, backyard pigs, those kinds of things. And these small and highly distributed operations, you can't contaminate millions of pounds of ground beef if it's not all ground in some huge factory somewhere. Yes, there can be problems, but they're very, very small and they're very local and easier to identify and do something about if you know where things are from. Because there are a lot of advantages to that.
I mean, somebody put it to me, I was describing the book, and he said, it's back to the land in the city. And, when you do that, it's not something that's only for people who want to escape society and sort of, become entirely self-sufficient. It's not being, your great-grandparents or something like that. I think that's a line, you say in your chapter. It's being who you are with the busy life you have, with the community you have, with the different interests and involvements you have. And this is a way for you to play a role in a city feeding itself and you feeding yourself and doing so well.
It's a model for interdependence.
Bill McKibben, who is the founder of 350.org, his book is called Earth, E-A-A-R-T-H, and his thesis, which I think he demonstrates pretty much conclusively, is that global warming has already transformed this planet to a different place than the planet that's been supporting human civilization for thousands of years, and that we're all, and that no matter what anybody does now, further devastating changes are coming and can't be stopped at this point, that we're past a number of tripping points. And so after that discouraging start, he goes on to how are we going to live now, how are we going to live in this difficult future, and it's with a lot more interdependently than we do now, a lot less individually, but focused on local food and local energy. That's our future, those of us who are going to survive this cataclysm which is already upon us.
And I didn't pay her to say that you need to buy the book in order to survive. As she may, I don't know if you know this, but Bill McKibben wrote the foreword to the book. And he says what's going on here is a national model. And there's parts that would look familiar to people from a long time ago, but it's also forward focused and cutting edge. And it's important to be encouraged too, is what he says. It's important to be inspired too, because it's a lot easier to act on inspiration and bring other people together on inspiration than the reverse.
I've gotten to be pretty much evangelical about the book Earth since I read it. I hardly ever have a conversation with anybody anymore that I don't really urge them to get this book.
Put By Earth, and for another little piece of Bill McKibben, By Growing a Garden City. I don't know if that's the time we have or not. We can if there's more questions until they yank us, I'm happy to go for it. Yeah.
How many schools in Missoula have gardens?
Yeah, and that's another piece of the puzzle. We were talking about that there's the 4 mini farms, there's the 7 community gardens, and then there's a series of school gardens which are some in partnership with, are they, yeah, so how many?
4.
4.
I don't know if I can name them all.
There's Meadow Hill, there's Lowell, Washington, and Willard. And
It's always done with school really taking on, just as the gardens, same model. The school kind of takes it on, has to raise some funds, as well as we provide through our education program, someone coming and kind of helping advise.
expertise, curriculum, and and the kids leading, the students, the people, the professionals, the adults leading the field trips at a lot of these sites are in fact students in environmental education at the University of Montana. So I love that, again, it's an example of interdependence. The class they're leading is part of a class they're taking. And without the kids, they couldn't become teachers. And another aspect of that is, as I said, how do you get kids to eat that food? Well, yeah, make it dirty, let them pick it up from the ground. There's lots of other tips in the book. But another really important and I think innovative program is some of these sites have kids cooking classes. And that's really empowering because, I've used this example before, so if anyone's heard me talk on this before, forgive me, but it's a lot easier to know how to eat a chocolate cake than, even if it's a week old and you get it damaged from the supermarket donated at the food bank, than a celeriac or a potato or an onion or a winter squash. So at the same time, it's amazing. It's maybe more magical to eat one of those things once someone showed you how to cook it yourself. And you've seen it transform from this piece of dirt to a beautiful, to French fries or a baked potato.
Kale chips.
Or kale chips. What was the question? What's celeriac?
Yeah.
Celeriac is celery root. It looks like Admiral Akbar from the movie Star Wars. It is delicious. If you peel it, you could put it raw in a salad, but if you bake it, it's just has a wonderful mix of sort of potato and celery. It's just a wonderful root vegetable. I highly recommend it in your Thanksgiving thing. Put it under the turkey, and with the mix of other things, you'll start picking it out. You'll pass the potatoes, the carrots, the garlic and stuff, the mushrooms, the onions, and you'll pick out the celeriac. It's extraordinary.
I just thought we should, it's part of an education thing, and that we should stress that more and more schools do have gardens, because historically in the early part of the 1900s, the first 40 years, there were school gardens in almost every community. And if we bring that to the schools and enable them to incorporate that into their curriculum, because it was widespread.
Yeah, and we've got reference in the book to some school curriculums incorporating gardens into the curriculum. Schools are responsive to demand, like other government agencies. Tell them what you want, and they'll try to do it, especially if you're involved yourself. And I want to go back to that earlier question, because I felt like I left that part out about school lunch programs and local food and lunch programs. Write to them, or call them, or visit, and say it's something that you want. And say, furthermore, you'd like it to be transparent. You'd like to know where they're buying it from and in what quantity. So you know that I'm not, saying that's just a universal thing, wherever it is, so you're like, okay, they're spending on vegetables, or they're getting it, they're getting wheat for this kind of bread from here. And I think that's better for the kids too, because then it puts the farmer's face on it. And they have that at the University of Montana really well, where and at the Good Food Store, at any kind of grocery store, and even stores that don't have local food, they still have pictures of farmers on every product you'll find. They'll have a picture of a barn or a rooster or whatever. Just happens to be a lie, but it's still there. We might as well know where our stuff's coming from and, get the real faces of it, especially because they're our fellow Montanans. And a really interesting thing I found was in a survey of local farmers and ranchers in Montana, that is, serving that farm to cafeteria program at the university, they said the biggest thing for them, they loved the extra business, they liked the new relationships, but what they valued most is they took pride because they were serving other people in their state and people knew where their food was going. It wasn't going basically into a vast commodity silo where they never saw where it ended up or in what form it ended up. And that's something to look for too, value-added products. So we're not just raising wheat and cattle, we're also able to make burgers and buns in the state again. Or veggie burgers and buns. And, that's important because that's where the value is on the larger agricultural picture. Any other questions?
Great work you're doing.
Well, let's give these are the 3 people doing the work. I'm just reporting on it, but take a look. Give them a hand.